the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 115 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 41 of A Clash of Kings, that's Tyrion 9.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, while we do all that, we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and locations of this chapter. That just goes to show that even after all these years, I can still screw up the standard beginning.
You'd think we could do this with just our eyes closed.
Yeah, but I actually glanced away to see how the levels looked, and I lost my thread. You know, I've said it 115 times, and I still don't remember it. How are you?
I am doing very well. Just came back from a trip to the mountains, which was beautiful. We had a really great time, did some amazing hikes, saw some just beautiful waterfalls. And then we spent some time in a brewery and a winery, which, doesn't do all that much for me, but, I enjoyed the food. So
yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
How about you? How are you doing? I'm
doing all right. I was telling you that Lucas has moved. My son has changed his location for his job. He works at Dunkin' Donuts, and now he's working at a different Dunkin' Donuts, and they're much more professional. Like, for instance, on his first day, they made him fill out some tax forms, which, with hindsight, I'm thinking perhaps his first Dunkin' Donuts should have had him do.
You think that?
But he called with a panic to say, "Do I have any dependents?"
Does Twiggy count?
He doesn't have a clue. So we're helping him all with these questions. The poor kid. And this place, I mean, this place is way more professional. He's working way harder. He does not like it. He liked the place where they could just eat ice cream and donuts whenever they felt like.
Right.
Clothes. Sometimes they didn't have donuts. This place is different.
They don't let them partake in the food?
That's what he tells me, but maybe it's just because he was too shy to ask on his first day.
Well, gotta let the kids at least taste some of the wares. If someone says, "Hey, which donut should I get?" they need to be able to say, "Get the Boston cream over the..."
For sure, yeah, good point.
What other donut? Yeah. Well...
So what else? I played soccer. My team lost again. We're not playing very well.
Huh.
It's weird.
Is it through work or the rec?
No, this is my over 40s city league.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you scored last time and the heavens opened up, so
that's
you'd think
right,
there would be divine intervention whenever necessary.
Yeah. There weren't enough clouds in the sky for me to score.
Yes. Well, we came back to a house where Ethan has been playing dad of the house. This is Sunday. We've been gone since Thursday morning, and he picked Molly up from school, took her to swim practice, got her food, took her to school the next morning, took her to a friend's house, and he's also been watching the dog all weekend. And he's done a pretty good job. The house is still standing.
Oh, good.
The only
no bonfires in the corner.
The biggest mishap so far is that what we believe to be the dog has puked in our bed.
Dog. Or one of his buddies.
Right. We're going to go with dog until we have reason to believe otherwise, but...
It's giving off a real gin vibe, but we think it's the dog.
So, if that's the only hiccup we have to deal with, I guess we'll be all right. But
yeah, not too bad.
Unfortunate to come home after a 4-hour drive and discover vomit in the bed on the comforter. So, anyway,
well, I'm sure you've got other things to do, so let's get on with business today, shall we?
Let's do
How
so.
did we leave Tyrion Lannister? Last time we saw Tyrion, he was receiving the news of Renly's death, making plans with Peter Baelish to send Peter to the Reach to bring the Tyrells into Team King's Landing versus Team Besiege King's Landing, and receiving unexpectedly kind words from his sister Queen Cersei. He's sure she's up to something.
Yep.
Why don't we give him the summary of this one?
All right. Well, Tyrion watches as Myrcella boards the Sea Swift and takes her leave of her family. She's stoic, but Prince Tommen is distraught. Tyrion reminds the captain of King Robert's hammer of the plan. Let nothing befall the Sea Swift en route to Braavos, no matter the cost to the other ships being, in addition to King Robert's hammer, the Lion Star, the Bold Wind, and the Lady Lyanna. At least those are the named ships anyway. Sir Arys Oakheart of the Kingsguard would accompany Myrcella and secure her passage from Braavos to Sunspear. The idea being that Stannis wouldn't want to bring down the wrath of the most powerful of the free cities by attacking one of their ships.
Of course, this plan severely depletes the already inadequate naval force of King's Landing, but Cersei has insisted on overprotection. Tyrion didn't argue much, he cares for Myrcella too, and the plan to appease the Martells crumbles if the princess doesn't get there. Her arrival in Braavos is to be the trigger for Doran Martell to send his forces into the passes into Dorne, threatening the Stormlands without actually engaging, forcing Stannis to leave some of his strength behind, and discouraging any rash Dornish houses from joining Stannis' cause.
As the High Septon lays an overlong blessing on Myrcella's journey, Tyrion joins his family. From Lancel, he's learned that Cersei's newfound religious zeal, daily meetings with the High Septon, are a front for dealings with a band of unsavory hedge knights, the Kettleblacks. The idea is to recruit a force of sellswords loyal specifically to her. Unfortunately for Cersei, Bronn is matching her penny for penny, and the Kettleblacks are working only for Tyrion. As the ships move out, Joffrey upbraids Tommen for his tears, but Sansa reminds the king of heroes who have cried in the past. Joffrey reacts unpleasantly.
Tyrion wonders where Littlefinger is. There's been no word since he left for Bitterbridge. It's too much to hope that he might be dead. The royal party heads back through the streets of King's Landing. The splendour of the parade in stark contrast to the unhappiness and hunger in the crowd. A woman steps forth with mad eyes and a dead baby. Sansa convinces Joffrey to throw her a coin rather than riding her down.
Good plan.
The coin bounces off the baby and leads to a fight over it in the crowd. Cersei speaks, and the woman is roused from her torpor. The woman unleashes a string of vitriol against the queen.
At this point, Joffrey is pelted with dung. He demands the thrower be brought to him and sends the Hound into the crowd to bring the culprit forward. Joffrey's angry shouts and the Hound's unpleasant manner are all increasing the pressure, and things begin to boil over. Tyrion calls for a retreat, and with lances lowered, they make their way back hastily. Tyrion sees various people pulled from their horses, and Joffrey ride down a citizen. They race into the safety of the Red Keep.
Tyrion slaps and kicks his nephew for setting his dog on the crowd. Missing are the High Septon, Sir Preston Greenfield, Aeron Sandker, Lollis Stokeworth, cousin Tyrek Lannister, the Hound, and very alarmingly, Sansa Stark.
Uh-oh.
Tyrion and Cersei share the same fear. If Sansa is harmed, Jaime is dead. She sends Blunt and Trant to rescue her as soon as possible, so Boros wonders that their white cloaks might incite the crowd further. Tyrion's had enough and tells Blunt to take off his cloak if he's too scared to wear it.
At this point, Clegane arrives back on Sansa's horse with Sansa behind him. She's got a nasty cut and is bubbling about the Hound disarming a man that tried to pull her from the saddle. And when I say disarming, I mean literally removing the man's arm from his body.
The man was not armed.
Right.
But now he certainly isn't.
He had 2 arms. Now he has at least only 1, as far as we know. Clegane confirms that Santagar was killed. He never saw Lollies, and a cry of fire further disrupts the day. Tyrion dispatches Bronn and Clegane to protect the water wagons to put out the fires. The Hound agrees only because he wants to find his horse. Tyrion reinforces that the fire must not reach the Alchemist Guild.
Tyrion calls for a curfew and sends Trant and Blunt to see to it. Cersei is in lockstep with Tyrion, equally annoyed at the Kingsguard. Tyrion returns to the Tower of the Hand. He dispatches some of his clansmen to protect Shae. Later, Bronn reports that the fires are under control, and then Bywater reports that the High Septon has been killed, Preston Greenfield too. Lollis Stokeworth survived, but had been repeatedly raped, and cousin Tyrek Lannister is still unaccounted for.
Bywater further reports that he's not sure how long they can keep control of the city. There's no food, laws breaking down, the bloody flux has become prevalent in the city, The small folk have little love for the Lannisters, and Tyrion most of all, whose arrival coincided with the worst of their privations. Varys arrives with Bronn, and talk turns to how much better life would be if Tommen were king.
Can I say, I love this chapter.
Yeah,
I love this chapter a lot. So much happens, I like the fact that geopolitical things are happening, like with Myrcella's being shipped off, but also sort of like, action is happening here in the city with the anger of the small folk beginning to boil over.
Yeah, definitely. And like we talked about last, I think it was the cat chapter, that a lot of times Martin's action happens off screen. We hear about it happening or having happened. Here we see it firsthand, which is pretty cool.
But most of all, any chapter where Joffrey gets slapped.
Yes, that is definitely a cherry on top right there.
Yeah. So Myrcella's journey is quite complicated. Just as a comparison for the TV show, she goes straight to Dorne in the TV show. Okay. But here, I'd forgotten this. They ship her off to Braavos, so they're going. In fact, the route they're taking is north along the coast of Westeros, and then jagging across to Braavos when they get further north,
right? To
sort of go around Stannis' fleet, which presumably is patrolling much of the Narrow Sea.
Yeah. First of all, the reason she's being sent, just to remind anybody, she's being sent to Dorne as a ward and also as a betrothed to Trystane Martell, who's the youngest of Dorne Martell's son. The youngest son of Dorne Martell, who's Dorne is the Prince of Dorne. But yeah, it's a very roundabout way to get to Dorne. You'd be hard pressed to find a more roundabout way, because Braavos is in the northwest tip of Essos.
Right.
And it's basically where the Narrow Sea and the Shivering Sea meet. The Shivering Sea being the sea north of Essos. So it is way up there. Then they're going to turn around and travel the length of the Narrow Sea all the way down to the south of Dorne, south of Westeros to Sunspear.
Yeah. But the rationale being that journey will take them straight through Stannis' fleet, and they need to be in a ship that isn't a Lannister ship at that point. It needs to be a Braavos ship.
Yeah, the plan certainly makes some sense. I mean, if most of Stannis' fleet is off the coast of Storm's End, they're going to have to go past Storm's End. So, if she's in a Braavosi ship, it's much less likely for her to be discovered.
I guess you could have. I mean, obviously they're getting out of King's Landing, hopefully without being seen. So I guess you could have tried to sneak south, but it just...
Yeah, it's complicated because Tyrion has the captain of Robert's Hammer repeat back to him what the plan is, and he says, we're going to hug the coast until we reach Crackclaw Point and then make for Braavos. Stay clear of Dragonstone. But Dragonstone, Driftmark, Claw Isle, they all sit right off the coast of Crackclaw Point. And those are all Stannis' bannermen. As the Lord of Dragonstone, basically every island in the Gullet, which is the kind of the bay, the part that leads to the bay where King's Landing is, are all Stannis' bannermen. So, they're going to have to sneak their way up through the Gullet to get her out.
Yeah, I will say though, I mean, they are making plans in anticipation of being spied and chased.
Right.
And basically, the plan is that if it's one or two boats, they engage and sink them. Because I mean, Rob's Hammer is a 400-oared warship. I mean, it could destroy almost anything in its path, you'd think. But if it's a fleet coming after them, that everybody but the Sea Swift and the Bold Wind, I think, are to engage and harry and slow them down, while the Sea Swift tries to go as fast as it can. The Sea Swift that Myrcella is on is a small ship with big sails, so it should be able to outrun a warship, is the idea.
That's the plan. I found it a little bit interesting that he trusts someone from Braavos to not sell him out. You're keeping it in the royal fleet. You can feel fairly confident that that the person that you chose will do what you tell them to. But you start farming out to third parties, the trust goes down a bit. But I guess if there's enough gold at stake.
I think the Braavosi are sort of known for being businessmen who,
True.
will do what they're paid to do.
Home of the Iron Bank and all.
Yeah, it might be cheaper to give them one of the warships and say, this is now your warship, so it now sails under Braavosi colours.
Right, yeah, good point. He has chosen Sir Arys Oakheart of the Kingsguard to be Myrcella's sworn shield, and Sansa has mentioned in previous chapters that she felt he was the most agreeable and honorable of the Kingsguard that she has dealt with. She said he's only hit her once, at least at that point, and he seemed to feel bad about it, unlike the rest. So I guess he seems like a pretty honorable guy.
And you can imagine Tyrion perhaps choosing... Oh, sorry. And perhaps you can imagine Tyrion choosing the gentlest of the Kingsguard to be Myrcella's protector, because she's like 9-10 years old.
Right.
Tyrion mentions that Myrcella doesn't cry. She's a Lannister and she knows she's not supposed to cry. But Tommen is younger and can't help himself and he blubs a lot. Joffrey upbraids Tommen for crying, which is just a very Joffrey thing to do. No sense of comforting. Whereas Myrcella does comfort Tommen. She tries to comfort him, which presumably was even more upsetting for her, but she still held back the tears because she's Cersei's daughter at the end of the day.
Right. Good point. Yes.
It's got to be hard for Cersei. She's had her 3 children with her all this time. Plenty of noble people give up their children to be fostered elsewhere.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot.
Yeah. But she's had her 3 children with her all their lives. And to see... it's... With the state of the realm, it's got to feel dangerously final. You might never see her again, sort of thing.
Yeah. Right. She's being sent to Dorne, and that's not exactly friendly territory for Lannisters. So just sending her to Dorne has its inherent risk.
Right. But the Martells have agreed to this plan. Presumably they're not planning to, take revenge on the Lannisters for this. This is a plan they've agreed to.
And I believe it was that Tyrion, when he was convincing Cersei of this plan, said that Dorne Martell is too honorable to go back on something he's agreed upon and harm.
I have a question for you, actually, about the Martells. So she's betrothed to Doran's youngest son.
Yes.
Is Doran's eldest son available?
So his oldest son, he's got 3 children. He's got a daughter named Arianne, a son named Quentyn, and then Trystane. Quentyn is a bit older than Myrcella. I think he's nearing 20-ish. And Trystane is just about Myrcella's age. Yeah, he's like maybe 10, 11. But I guess they could have chosen Quentyn.
That's my question. That's what I'm getting at here. Is it a little dig by the Martells back at the Lannisters to marry a princess of the realm to their second son?
Right.
Their first?
Yeah, it definitely, you could make... I guess they're desperate enough right now to overlook any such slights. But...
Now, if I remember the sort of primogeniture rules in Dorne, Arianne is the heir, right? It goes to the eldest child of either gender. So it's not like you're denying the heir the ability to marry the princess.
You are correct, yes. Arianne, in Dorne, it goes to the oldest child, man or woman. So, yes.
That's weird that I remembered that, Mackelly.
It is, a little bit, yeah.
But if something happened to Arianne, then Quentyn would be in line, and therefore, she would become Lady of Sunspear. But if she were given to Quentyn, but they're choosing to give her to Trystane, which feels like it's just one last slap in the face by the Martells.
I had not thought about it that way, yeah. I'd have to look, off the top of my head, I can't say much more without possible spoiler. So
okay. They may have another plan for Quentyn. I get it. But whatever plan they may have for Quentyn, it's in the mind of the Lannisters, it cannot possibly trump marrying Myrcella Baratheon.
Yes.
She's the princess of Westeros.
Right.
Yeah, it would be who you would marry.
Younger sister to King Joffrey.
Exactly.
Yes.
I don't care what their plan is. All right. So anyway, thank you for the digression. I apologize.
But so Cersei, she kind of insisted on a large fleet escorting Myrcella, which in some ways is a little bit dangerous because the bigger the fleet, the more noticeable they might be. But also, of course, the more defense they have. And Tyrion thinks, we already have a short supply of ships because of the ships that went with Stannis to Dragonstone when he left. And that's a reference if you recall, when Robert and Cersei made the trek after Jon Arryn's death to Winterfell to ask Ned to be Hand of the King, Stannis left King's Landing. And there was we were speculating on whether it had something to do with Jon Arryn's death. And we learned that it was just a slight. He felt slighted that he wasn't asked to be Hand of the King, and so he left. But before he left, he was Robert's master of ships. So it would make sense that he might have taken a large force with him as the master of ships for the king.
Right. So, yeah, it's definitely dangerous for King's Landing. I mean, I guess they don't have a fleet big enough to defend themselves from naval attack anyway. So it's not a great loss to lose what's left of your fleet, but this is a large part of what's left of the fleet, including the biggest ship that they have available in Robb's Hammer.
Right.
But I guess the idea is that ship should make it back if it encounters some. So anyway, the plan is that when Myrcella gets to Braavos, that will be the signal for Doran Martell to move his troops to Dorne's northern border. It's just a distraction, really, to give the Stormland lords pause before they head off to King's Landing, because that's their border, the border between Dorne and the Stormlands.
Right.
The plan is not to engage unless they are themselves attacked. Now, I added to the summary, which wasn't actually said in the chapter, but it would also stop any Dornish lords from joining Stannis' cause. I wasn't sure if that was a part of it. That was not mentioned in the chapter, but it occurred to me that Renly, at least, had been sending ambassadors to Dorne, and maybe had been, and we know that Stannis has been spreading word far and wide that he's the true king.
Right.
So I would think that was at least in the back of their minds when they wanted this to happen, that no sort of a lord who didn't feel particularly compelled to obey Doran Martell might switch sides on him.
Sure.
But now his force would have to pass through the passes and come across Doran's forces and say, "Oh, we were just going for a vacation."
I just wanted to go north for a bit. Yeah. Now, Tyrion thinks that Stannis is too smart to attack the Dornish troops. I was thinking, he seems in no hurry to take the incredibly vulnerable King's Landing. Why not make an excursion into Dorne first?
I see you've now defended the passes, making this more of a challenge. Okay. Challenge accepted.
And like you said, they're giving up a big asset. And I mean, I hate to refer to a person as an asset, but in this situation, Myrcella is being treated kind of like an asset. So, the marriage to the younger sister of the king for nothing more than to move some troops as a distraction.
But I think you're being too short term in that thinking. The bigger thing is, but the Martells don't join with Stannis. That's right. That's what you're actually saying.
Yes,
and for that you give up Myrcella. Right.
It's better than have them joining Stannis or Robert. Exactly. Robb. Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's true. But it is, they're not committing to any actual help. They're just saying, okay.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. But maybe that's phase 2. They only told us that phase 1 of the plan was that when she arrived in Braavos, that was to happen. Maybe phase 2 of the plan is once she gets to Sunspear, then those troops roll into the Stormlands and make Stannis turn around.
Well, yeah. That could be. But we have not heard beyond what they'll do when she gets to Braavos.
It feels like there's several weeks, possibly months of sea travel ahead of Myrcella before that happens.
Solid point.
Probably Stannis will still be.
He'll still be waiting for Edric Storm. He'll be like begging, "Please, Courtney Penrose, just open the door."
Courtney Penrose is up on the walls chewing his shoe. This is good, actually.
But also, of course, not committing, Dorne Martell not committing to the war effort keeps Doran's cards to his chest. So the rest of the realm doesn't know exactly what Dorne's military resources are. So therefore it's tough to assess him as an ally or a foe if he's not willing to physically send troops that can be counted and assessed.
It does make you wonder. I mean, could you marry your son to their daughter and then still attack them? It feels like you could. It's definitely possible.
Right. Yeah.
The Florence declared for Renly.
True. Yeah. Minus Axel and Selyse.
True. Not all. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
But it does feel like it's very hard for Stannis to imagine the Martells are going to join on his side.
Oh, yes, I agree. When he gets wind of this marriage proposal here, I assume he will figure that they are not coming to his
side. Does it bury the hatchet? The thing is, I can see if you were already on a sort of parity level, that this works. The royal family is giving up their only daughter to your house as a peace offering, so you're going to make peace with them. We're not asking you to do very much, just don't join in the war against us. Right. That seems like parity. But there's still this overarching, the Martells there's a debt to be paid to the Martells for the murder of Elia Martell. And it feels like that's why the Lannisters are settling for what they're settling for here.
I agree.
They're settling for what they can get. Because they know that there's still a debt here that the Martells are not going to easily forgive.
Right. There's definitely... If there's feels like frosty relationship, we're going to take it real slow.
Right.
First thing we're going to do is just not join the other team's side. We'll go from there. See how it works.
So back to Tyrion. He looks out and sees the growing winch towers and prays that he just gets 2 more weeks before Stannis arrives. But honestly, Stannis wouldn't be so stupid as to get well. I'm joking. I can't even get through that. He's gonna. There's many a defended castle he needs to attack on the way.
Right. He seems all too happy to oblige to the just need 2 more weeks request.
But I don't exactly know what a winch tower is. I assume that they're the 2 ends of this chain that he's building.
Yeah. So I looked it up too, and now I've forgotten what I looked up that a winch tower was. But it certainly seems to have something to do with the chain. That they've been building.
I guess.
Okay. Now, this has, of course, nothing has played out yet, so we'll have to see how it goes. But it just felt very convenient that Tyrion thinks in his head, I just need 2 more weeks. And we've heard that Stannis gave Courtney Penrose 2 weeks to open the castle. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But, Tyrion thinks if Stannis knew that we were, of this sailing, of Myrcella sailing, there'd be no better time to sail against us. And I wondered if I wondered if Melisandre could possibly see this happening in her flames. She'd supposedly be able to see the future and stuff in fire. So
yeah, because it is a golden opportunity. They just depleted their fleet. The winch towers aren't ready. Get in there, win it.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen. I don't think.
Well, at least
not soon. Not soon enough. You
gotta wonder: does Stannis have no spies at all? No, Dragonstone bannermen from the Gullet, or are the Valyrians not keeping an eye on such things as this type of sailing going on here? Nobody's reporting back to him on conditions within King's Landing, saying you could literally walk into the city right now.
I've got a theory on this actually.
Yeah,
I reckon he does have spies, but their ravens are all been cooked in a pot. Pot brown.
A pot of brown in flea
They're
bottom.
writing notes, but there's no ravens to take them.
That could be.
So, remembering back to last Tyrion chapter, Cersei was hiding something. Remember, she was sweet to Tyrion and that. always spells something other than Cersei being nice.
Yep.
So she's recruiting her own sellswords to counter Tyrion's mountain clans, and it makes a certain amount of sense. She had control of the Gold Cloaks before Tyrion arrived, and she has lost control of the Gold Cloaks to Tyrion. His removal of Janos Slynt in favour of Jacelyn Bywater has clearly switched that over to his side.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for her, unbeknownst to her, the Kettle Blacks, Osmond, Osney and Osfred, are already on the Tyrion and Bronn payroll. And for this, Tyrion owes Lancel, because Lancel is the one who told him what Cersei was up to, under the cover of daily visits to the High Septon.
Right.
She was actually then going off to meet with the Kettle Blacks.
Yeah. Now, of course, she's also lost her Lannister guard that Tyrion sent to Riverrun to mask Jaime's hopeful liberators, which did not work out so well for them. But maybe this is where, remember you were saying last time that all that setup of sending those 4 to get Jaime amounted to nothing, just them being hung. Maybe sending those 4 and requiring all of these Lannister guards was setting something else up.
Is the thing that will have the long-term repercussions rather than the execution of the plan. It was the formation of the plan that will have the repercussions.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. No, we're kind of watching the Game of Thrones thing be played out right here between these siblings. You know, Cersei told Ned, "You win or you die" when you play the Game of Thrones. So, you know, we're kind of watching these two try and match each other wit for wit and strategy for strategy.
Right. But Tyrion, being a Lannister, I guess, plays it a lot more like Cersei does. You know?
Yes, a lot better, stronger opponent than Ned was, for sure. Yeah, he certainly seems more clever than Cersei, but
yeah, he's a step ahead of her. I think Cersei's become sort of sloppy as queen.
Sure.
I have a feeling that she's as smart as Tyrion, but she's sort of so used to getting her own way that she's lost her edge a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, she's certainly plenty intelligent enough. I can see what you're saying. She also has some assets at her disposal that Tyrion doesn't have. But then those assets have been counteracted by Tyrion's brain, such as, you know, she used some assets that she has to her disposal to entice Lancel onto her side. And then Tyrion used his brains to flip Lancel to his side. So it's quite the interesting battle going on here between the two of them in King's Landing.
In the midst of all that's going on in this chapter, Tyrion takes a moment to think about Littlefinger, and no word of him after he was dispatched to Bitterbridge to take the idea of a marriage between Margaery Tyrell and Joffrey. So Varys wonders if Littlefinger might be dead, but Tyrion doesn't think that's likely. He thinks more likely that Tyrells are balking at their marriage disposal. That Mace Tyrell would rather have Joffrey's head on a spike than his in his daughter.
Right.
and I approve Mace Tyrell's parenting on that one.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that last Tyrion chapter, when Littlefinger was convincing Tyrion and Cersei to let him go to Bitterbridge and treat with Loras, you know, eventually Tyrion acquiesced despite his reservations. But aside from Margaery, we don't think there's any other Tyrells in Bitterbridge. So you'd think this would have to be run through Mace Tyrell, their father, would make the final decision. So either he's made his way to Bitterbridge, or Littlefinger has to go to Highgarden to hammer out these details. But it's an important detail, the fact that they've not heard from Littlefinger, because they really need this Tyrell support, especially with Tywin having marched west to meet Robb. His force is no longer sitting at Harrenhal, a short jaunt down to defend them. So.
Exactly. If Stannis arrives ever at King's Landing,
ever
to be met, he's coming from the south, to be met coming from the west with the Tyrell force. If those two are coming together for the same purpose, King's Landing falls.
Right.
But if they're coming for opposite purposes, then
it's a battle.
The game is afoot. Exactly.
Right. Now, so the path taken that this procession is taking. I just wanted to go through it real quick. By what I mean is the royal procession here.
The Tyrion and Joffrey and Cersei procession.
Yes, the royal
not
procession.
Not Stannis' procession to King's Landing.
That hasn't even begun yet, I don't think. So remember, if you think of King's Landing as a diamond, the harbor is along the Blackwater Rush is on the southeast side of the diamond. So after leaving the harbor, they come in through the Muddy Gate, and then they cross through Fishmonger Square, which is right inside the Muddy Gate. Then that takes them onto Muddy Way, and that starts heading in toward the heart of King's Landing. But about a quarter of the way up Muddy Way, there's a right turn onto what's called the Hook, because it kind of arcs up Aegon's High Hill into the Red Keep. And so they made it through all of that up onto the Hook, toward up the hill toward the Red Keep, and that's where the riot broke out on the Hook. Which that's why the ride didn't take all that long when they decided to just run through the congestion of people.
That's good intel, actually, because I did wonder about that. I did wonder about the danger of going to the harbour, but actually they weren't going that far from the Red Keep, so they figured they could risk it. Whereas if it had been all the way across the city, they might have said their goodbyes to Myrcella and at the Red Keep and
done it on the down low.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. But then when they get back to the Red Keep, we hear the shout of fire. The fires are in Flea Bottom, which is not near here. Flea Bottom's much more in the northern part of the city, right?
Yes, it's in the kind of the center north part of the city.
Right.
Yep. So it's nowhere near where they came in from.
So there's a sense that the rioting is spreading from this epicenter.
Right. Exactly. And so speaking of the riot. So what happens? Joffrey gets hit in the head with the dung, and he's angry.
Wait, just a second.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Joffrey gets hit in the head with the dung, and he wipes it off twice, and it's still there. And he's angry, and he sends the Hound out into the crowd to find the culprit. And the Hound really can't get through this massive humanity. And Joffrey shouts to the Hound to cut through the throng.
Yes.
And I think that is the spark that set off
powder keg. Yeah.
Yes, when he says, "Cut through my own people to find someone who threw dung at me." That's when it really begins. And that's specifically
why Tyrion beats on him when they get back, to the point where the Kingsguard feel the need to intervene. This is no longer a avuncular assault. This is now a risk to the king's life.
Right. Yeah.
But I did notice when they get back to the Red Keep, and sort of there's a lot of shouting about the people who are missing.
Yeah, a lot of chaos.
Cersei very much takes Tyrion's side on everything.
Right.
When we're in panic stations, she respects Tyrion's leadership here, and she certainly agrees with him. She is shouting at the people who you might think of as her allies, Boris Blunt, Meryn Trant. She's giving them an earful, just like Tyrion is.
Right, yeah. She was oddly quiet about making really any commands. She was pretty much just taking a back seat and letting Tyrion lead here. She even said nothing about the treatment of Joffrey from Tyrion. She didn't, yell at him. She did go to Joffrey after, I think it was Sir Meryn or one of the Kingsguard pulled Tyrion off of him. But she didn't yell at Tyrion or anything.
Right.
She came to Tyrion's side in the dispute with Sir Boris and backed him when Sir Meryn balked about guarding the heralds.
I think, actually, didn't Sir Boris, I think it was Sir Boris, said, "We don't take orders from you, imp. We take orders from the king." And Cersei leaps in with, "He's the hand of the king. He speaks for the king." It's like, good God.
And defying his voice is treason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we see here is that on some level she really does respect Tyrion's intellect and abilities. She just also has such a dislike for him that it's it's hard for her to accept that. But in this moment, when there's all this chaos, she let him make these calls about things.
Yeah. So the biggest danger, of course, is obviously there's quite a few people missing that they would like to get back. Their own cousin Tyrek Lannister, for one,
right,
and also Aaron Santagar and Preston Greenfield, and the High Septon, who is her front for her visits with the Kettleblacks. But Sansa, Lolly Stokeworth, remember everyone who went missing. Right. But Sansa Stark's the big one, because Sansa obviously is their only Stark hostage.
Yes.
They've lost Arya, even though that's not well known yet. And if they can't trade Jaime for the Stark girls, then they ain't going to get Jaime back. So,
right.
But the Hound comes to the rescue, just as they're sort of like sending out a search party. He rides in on Sansa's horse with Sansa clinging to his back. She's cut, but otherwise unharmed. And I really felt a swell of like, I really love the Hound. And then I remembered he did murder Micah.
Right. Yeah.
Every time you feel fondness towards the Hound, remember that, because
yep,
it needs to stick in your mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see how obedient he is to Joff's commands. Joff said, go find the random guy in this sea of humanity who threw the dung at me, and he jumped off his horse to go do it. So you can imagine when he was told to find Micah dead or alive, and he rode him down and killed him. He was doing what he was told to do. So it's kind of hard to reconcile these two Sandor Cleganes, the one that's capable of killing an innocent child, and the one who possibly risked life and limb to save Sansa Stark.
Yeah.
Now,
when all's said and done, we get a list of the casualties. The High Septon was pulled from his palanquin and killed by the people, and his crown was stolen. That's gone missing.
Right.
Out of the world. be hard to launder that one, I feel like. It'd be hard to fence the...
You better get way out of the city before you try and sell that. I guess you could break it apart and take the jewels out and send them individually.
Tyrion thinks about the fact that High Septon was too fat to really walk, or certainly to ride a horse, and he did sort of like observe that starving people will often feel sort of like a degree of hatred towards a very fat priest. Right.
And we remember back several Tyrion chapters ago, after he left the guild hall of the alchemists, the street preacher was condemning the High Septon for his overindulgence and also for his apparent closeness with the Lannisters, despite the claim of incest within their family, which should go against the church's teachings. So,
But the High Septon is kind of the embodiment of what I've been talking about of the Tyrells,
Too fat and happy to get involved.
Too fat and happy to care about this incest thing. I am not rocking the boat.
We also lost Sir Preston Greenfield of the Kingsguard. Now, his body was overlooked for a while because they had been looking for a man wearing a white armor of the Kingsguard, but he was so bloody and beaten to a pulp that his white armor was red-brown. So now he's been around, his name has been mentioned a few times, but he's not really been talked about all that much, unlike the other members of the Kingsguard, like the Hound and Sir Boris Blunt and Sir Meryn Trant. So, but it does mean that there is a open spot in the Kingsguard. So
true. And I guess Arys Oakheart isn't coming back. I mean, he's going to stay and protect her.
Good point.
So maybe two open spots.
He's still technically a member of the Kingsguard.
I guess so.
So it depends on how they want to play that, I guess.
Yeah. So Aaron Santagar died as well. He's the Master of Arms at the Red Keep. Roderick met with him, if you remember, when he and Cat came to King's Landing to find out who owned the dagger used in an attempt on Bran's life. The cousin Tyrek Lannister, who's also known as the Wet Nurse by Horror and Slobber, as they call him, the Wet Nurse.
Yeah, just all the other squires make fun of him and call him the Wet Nurse. He was actually Robert's other squire, along with Lancel, when Robert was still alive. He didn't get knighted after Robert's death like Lancel did, though. Mm-hmm. But they call him...
And remind me, who gave Robert the wine that led to his death?
Oh, that was Lancel.
Oh, weird.
Convenient.
Okay, carry
So the reason they call him Wet Nurse is because he's married to baby Ermistad Hayford, head of House Hayford, and he was married to this baby so that the Lannisters could claim their lands. And actually that Sansa chapter when she met with Sir Dantas, and there was that skirmish going on at the gates of the Red Keep, and Joff rode off into the crowd. That was because they had heard about the feast, the upcoming feast for this wedding between Tyrek and Ermesand.
So how does he relate, Tyrek?
So Tyrion specifically says, Bywater says, unfortunately, there's been no sign of Tyrek. And he says, I want him found. He's the son of my uncle Tyget, who was kind to me. And so Tyget is the third son of Tytos, the fourth child. So after Jenna Lannister, but before Tyrion Lannister. So it goes Tywin, Jenna, Tyget, Tyrion.
Okay.
And Tyget died of a pox. So that's the deal there.
Lolly Stokeworth survived, but she was found sort of dazed and confused. They think she'd been raped by upwards of 50 citizens. So it's not very nice.
Terrible.
Remember, she was the one being courted by Littlefinger, presumably for her wealth, because she is overweight and simple.
Right. Well, I think it was Lady Tanda's courting of Littlefinger.
Yes.
For Lullies. And then, of course, that was in a Game of Thrones. In a Clash of Kings, she had switched to courting Tyrion for Lullies. Yes. So she's the youngest daughter of Tanda. She's about 33 years old. So, she's not a child, but like you said, she's multiple times in the book been described as simple. So
the Hound says never saw her when he was asked about her. So
yeah, just blows that off. One line, never saw her.
I mean, if he didn't see her, he didn't see her. There's not much point wasting words, but it does add to his aura of not really caring about it.
Yeah.
So Tyrion gets back to the Tower of the Hand, and he sends Shagga to guard Shea during the riot. He sends Shagga to guard Shay during the riot, which makes sense. I mean, she's out there in the city, and rioting has broken out. She needs looking after. The Mountain Clansman offers to bring her back, but he's like, no, keep her there. I'll come see her as soon as I can.
Yeah, and her manse is not far from Flea Bottom. It's kind of on the far side of Flea Bottom from the Red Keep. So, yeah definitely be a good idea, especially since this whole riot started where it did and has already spread to Flea Bottom. Right. Feels like there's no safe place at the moment.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, any kind of nice manse might become a target. They might think there'll be food in there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So Jacelyn Bywater reports in with Tyrion, and he gives him a no-holds-barred summary of what the common folk, of why the common folk hate the Lannisters, and apparently Tyrion most of all, which just feels so unfair on poor Tyrion.
Sure does.
But there is one facet of the complaint which Tyrion might want to think about. The intel says that that Tyrion is blamed for bringing the clansmen to King's Landing. The clansmen are murdering and wreaking havoc.
Yeah, and
that is on Tyrion. He can't deny that. He brought them.
Right.
We did hear earlier that Timett had killed someone, and Tyrion laughed it off. So
yeah, it was over cheating in a dice game, I think.
Right. You can imagine it happens in King's Landing all the time anyway, but it got noticed because it was a clansman. So, you gotta, when you bring an invading foreign army in, you've got to keep them onto a tighter leash, really.
Yeah, and so Bywater specifically goes on to say that the people feel like the gods are punishing them for the Lannisters' sins, and he names the sack of King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion, which was his father Tywin's doing. Yep. Jaime killing King Arys.
Jaime.
Yep. The butchery of Rhaegar's children.
The Mountain and
Sir Amory Lorch.
Amory Lorch, of course, yes.
Right. And the execution of Ned, which they all just watched. Of course, they didn't seem too burned up about it at the time. They seemed to be
they were enjoying themselves, really. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And they weren't quite as hungry then.
Right. And then lastly, he says Joffrey's savage justice, which we've seen in action. We've seen him during Sansa chapters make men fight to the death over just trivial squabbles, and he had a woman thrown in the dungeons because she loved someone who he deemed to be a traitor, and we've seen him ride out against the hungry at the Red Keep gates and fired crossbow into a crowd. So
The injustice is hard for Tyrion to swallow, of course, because he is
Exactly.
the only one who's given any thought to the people, really. Maybe Varys too, but nobody else.
Right, yeah. Back in Tyrion 3, he said, we got this description that he'd sent hundreds of carpenters to build fishing boats, taking them away from building defenses for the city. He opened the Kingswood to hunters, and he even sent gold cloaks foraging to deal with the hunger in the city, trying to scrounge up some food in the Kingswood. And we had talked at the time that we were concerned that those measures might not have been enough for such a city of 500,000.
Yeah, but Tyrion probably, with hindsight, should have done some better PR work to spell out the good they were trying to do. It wouldn't have been hard to portray Slynt as the monster he was. Jacelyn Bywater is a noble guy. You could portray him well.
Right.
You could definitely make a better job of this if you wanted to. And a full-out revolt in the city could add to the wide openness of King's Landing to Stannis.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
He arrives to a revolt. That's going to make it much more easy for him to scale the walls.
Yeah, maybe they'll open some gates. I mean, Bywater says he doesn't necessarily trust all of his own men. That Slynt had tripled the gold cloaks numbers, but it's not just a gold cloak that makes someone a member of the city watch. That, a lot of these folks are just members of the public, and they're just as disgruntled as the general public is. So you could imagine that these gold cloaks who might be guarding the Red Keep or the gates might just, accidentally leave the gate unlocked.
Yeah. A few chapters ago, when Tyrion was laying in bed with Shay, he was thinking about how much he loved the power and intrigue of this new position, but now we're seeing the other side of the same coin here.
Right.
You get blamed when things go wrong.
Yep, that you do.
So later, Bronn and Varys are both present with Tyrion, and Bronn is annoying Tyrion by being his usual self. Normally, Tyrion permits it. But Bronn basically says the unsayable. He says that Tommen would be a much more shapeable king than Joffrey. Tyrion is not happy about this, but you can't deny those words are going to stick in your head.
Sure, yeah.
A seed has been planted. But would Tommen change the citizens' view? If he did take Tyrion's lead, he might be perceived as a more benevolent and kind king, but then would he be seen as a puppet of Tyrion and therefore despised for it because they've already decided to hate Tyrion?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. He says, so Tyrion says, he thinks to himself, Bronn's probably right, but Joffrey is my own blood. He is Jaime's son as much as Cersei's, and so he thinks there's no way I could do that. But, I mean, if you think about if it was Tommen that was the eldest from the beginning, the realm could be in some sort of peace. Except for, Cat's still going to take Tyrion because of the cat's paw. Unless, we don't know who sent the cat's paw to kill Bronn with the Valyrian steel dagger. But, being that we don't know this, it's likely that Cat's still going to take Tyrion. So Tywin still attacks the Riverlands, but maybe the North might not be involved because Ned would have been sent to the Night's Watch instead of killed.
That would be the biggest change, yeah.
And possibly if Tommen had the ability to restrain himself from killing Ned, and they discover that Jaime's been taken captive, maybe he pardons Ned instead of sends him to the Night's Watch, and that would really put the North a lot more at peace.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought it would make such big differences, but now you're laying it out, it would actually be very different. I mean, I was thinking it would really make only a difference locally in King's Landing. King's Landing wouldn't be quite so unpleasantly opposed to the Lannisters. But what you're saying is that the realm could be very different. Wouldn't stop Stannis. Tommen is just as much a cuckoo as Joffrey, but other aspects of this would be very different. Certainly
would be different for Sansa.
Yeah, that's for sure, yeah. Okay, background.
So when Tommen is crying at Myrcella's departure, and Joffrey says, "You're mewing like a suckling babe," Sansa reminds Joffrey that Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight cried when his sister Nerys married his brother Aegon, and also that the twins, Sir Eric with an A and Eric with an E, died with tears on their cheeks after each had given the other a mortal wound. Well, Sir Eric with an A and Sir Eric with an E are actually Sir Eric and Eric Cargill. They're identical twin brothers, as well as members of the Kingsguard during the reign of King Viserys I Targaryen. After the death of King Viserys, the brothers found themselves backing different claimants to the throne in the Dance of the Dragons. Eric, with an A, sided with Aegon II and the Greens, meanwhile Eric, with an E, aligned himself with Rhaenyra and the Blacks. The Lord Commander of Aegon's Kingsguard, Sir Criston Cole, ordered Eric with an A to disguise himself as his brother, sneak into Dragonstone, and kill Rhaenyra and her children. The plan was working until the brothers ran into each other in the hallway. The brothers fought to the death. Versions of the duel range from the Singer's version, where the brothers fought for an hour, to the Full Mushrooms version, where the two mortally wounded each other within minutes. As Sansa said, the songs tell us that the brothers professed their love and died in one another's arms. Now, House Cargill is now extinct. However, it's believed that their sigil was a golden goose on black and red kind of angled stripes. Also, according to George Martin, Eric and Eric Cargill are inspired by two brothers from Arthurian legend, Balin and Balin.
Ah, well, thanks for that. Yeah, I never said who it was who cried, but yes, it was Eric and Eric, so thank you. Thanks for explaining. Comparison with the television show, we see Myrcella heading off to Dorne in tears. She's not quite so stoic as the book Myrcella. Root is more direct. She just goes straight to Dorne. Tyrion is with his sister as the ship pulls away, and she quietly spits vicious curses at him for what he's doing to her. Remember, this is his plan. And that never comes back up in the book, but Cersei is still mad about this. TV show.
Okay.
The riot and the temporary loss of Sansa are abbreviated, but captured in general. There is no Loris Stokeworth, so Sansa gets the role of damsel in very great distress of being gang raped. The Hound literally rescues her from being raped, and thankfully before any physical harm is done. The psychological harm may have already begun, but with Sansa, she's pretty much one big bag of psychological scars at this point, so maybe nothing too noteworthy.
Right.
Tyrion is present at the rescue and thanks the Hound, who brushes it off with his inimitable way, swearing like a sailor. So pretty much captured.
Yeah.
Pedantry. Just one little thing. They say that things are being pelted at them, like rotten cabbage and excrement, and worse. And I'm curious, what is worse than excrement in terms of being thrown at you?
Dead babies,
rocks
I guess,
would hurt you more. Dead babies is pretty nasty, yes. You know.
Yeah, I get your point. Yeah, I saw this on here and I chuckled at it. I don't know what is worse than excrement. Yeah, it's a good one.
News and notes.
Well, so I just wanted to mention real quick that the YouTube channel Fire and Blood has done some great house history videos. The animation and the voiceover acting is really well done, and they have them for a ton of houses. I've seen Starks, Lannisters, Tullys, Greyjoys, Arryns, Martells, Targaryens, and on. They've got a ton. And I swear that the Starks is voiced by Kit Harington, Sophie Turner, and Richard Madsen, which is Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, and Robb Stark. I'm pretty sure that I recognize those voices in there. So it's pretty cool. If you get a chance, some Fire and Blood YouTube channel. Check them out.
All right.
Go ahead, read this next one. I thought you might like it.
Okay, sure. Game of Thrones has had no shortage of show-themed products, from food to drinks to socks, of course, and so on. And even though the show's been over for several years, fans have new reason to give 3 cheers because they're getting new Game of Thrones beers. The Danish brewing company Mackelly has a deal to make more Game of Thrones beers. The first 3 globally released on October 15th were the Night King Double IPA, very good, Ghost Visions Lager, and Castle Black Stout. I'm going to drink the last of those the most.
I thought you might like
definitely going to drink them.
Do you want to read through? I've already read this review. Do you want me to do, or you want to do?
You can read this review, but can I say, just in passing, that I believe this person might have been in contact with my brother. My brother mentioned someone giving one of his snarkastic reviews a 5-star thumbs up kind of thing, and I believe it was this person. So.
Okay. Well, this person, the review name is Ryan Carner. The review goes like this. I've been listening to this podcast for about 3 months, having gotten to episode 71. I'm a huge Song of Ice and Fire series fan and listened to several other podcasts before stumbling upon this one. So moral of that is just we'll save you some time and just go directly to this one. It's really great. Despite having read the book series multiple times, I find the banter very refreshing. I think because Mackelly and Simon's attempt at making the podcast spoiler-free creates a new way of looking at the series. I recommend it to both fans of the entire series and those who are following along chapter by chapter. The flow of the sections of the show is also very nicely done, with a lot of ground covered in generally 1-hour episodes, depending on how long we yammer on, I guess.
Yeah.
I tend to listen to a few episodes per day, which sadly means I will be caught up and waiting weekly for the next show. I'm also surprised that there's no advertisements. You and me both.
Me too, Mackelly. What is wrong with us?
Truly refreshing. Honestly, I'd be okay with a few occasional ads to help you guys get some compensation for such excellent content. But it's very nice that you do this purely for the love of the series. Bravo, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ryan. If you need a job as our business manager, the position is open.
Yes, please get in contact. Actually, we got an email from Ryan, who hails from Pittsburgh, PA, much as myself.
Oh,
so
there you go.
Very cool. Ryan, I have not had a chance to respond yet because I was traveling today, but thank you. This review, I read it this morning, and I threw it right in because I thought it was such a lovely sentiment.
Thank you so much, Ryan. All right, conclusion. It's brutal for Tyrion to learn that he is the most reviled Lannister. The only one who gives a rat's behind. The bunch of ingrates that deserve
Seriously.
What they get.
Oh, that's got to be a hard pill to swallow for Tyrion. Ugh. He's the only one who cares.
Yeah. King's Landing is close to being defended, at least Tyrion believes so, if Stannis could just delay long enough. But that does appear to be a family trait of the Baratheon brothers.
It does indeed. 2 weeks? Oh, I can do that. No problem.
Yeah, sure. And what is Cersei's plan for the Kettlebacks? She's trying to spring something on Tyrion only for it to backfire, much like Ned and the Goldcloaks.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Right. Good analogy. I like that. Yeah. And will Myrcella get to Dorne safely? Will this precipitate the arrival on stage of the Martells? We've only heard about them so far.
Looking forward to the day. It's going to be exciting. And the Hound continues to be Sansa's protector.
Yeah. Was it any surprise that when Sansa went missing, it was the Hound who found her and brought her in safely? I mean, that just... You had to have assumed it was going to be him or Sardontis. My money would have been on the Hound. For sure.
Yeah, if it's a serious situation, you want the Hound. Really.
Right, yeah. But something like this was inevitable. We've been watching it build since Sansa won, when Joffrey's tourney for his name day was held in the Inner Bailey because there was too much unrest out in the streets to hold it at the tournament grounds.
Yeah, it was inevitable. Joffrey's behavior was just always going to precipitate this. So,
yeah,
there is an opening in the Kingsguard.
There is. Yeah.
And could Tyrion seriously consider nephew's side? I'm not sure that's the right word, but...
Yeah, not at the moment. He seems to, I mean, Joffrey could get under anyone's skin sufficiently.
Right.
But at the moment, he doesn't seem to be willing. But, I have one question about this. Where is Lord Varys? Why was he not with the procession?
He's there at the end, but where was he all day?
Right, yeah. Why wasn't he with the royal procession? He's a member of the small council. Should he not have been there?
Yeah.
Could there be something to that?
I don't know, Mackelly. I feel like you might know something I don't. That's how I always feel, to be honest.
I'm just asking the question. Could there be something to that? Let's ponder it.
Right. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com, and you can follow us at Twitter at @GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And if you'd please go out and leave us a 5-star rate and or glowing review, much like Ryan did today, it would mean so much to us at so many levels. It really helps us out, and it really is a great way for you to help us grow the show. So if you would go out and leave us a glowing review, we will do our best to read it on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.